Jayden Daniels is going into year 3, and if he can just stay healthy and get back to more what he looked like his rookie season, he is well poised to make a huge jump in 2026. But how well is Jayden set up in terms of the roster around him? In this video, I'm going to grade the Commanders' skill positions, offensive line, defense, and coaching staff to determine if the surrounding pieces are enough to allow Jayden Daniels to have success in 2026. So let's take a look at these different roster metrics and see how well this Washington Commanders roster is constructed around the third-year quarterback. So whenever you think about the Washington offense of the last however long Terry McLaurin has been in the NFL, 6, 7, 8 years, however long it's been now, you think about Terry McLaurin. And while that does say a lot about Terry and how good he is and how skillful of a player he is on the outside, whatever you really want him to do with him, I think this season it says a lot about the rest of the depth behind him. And in my opinion, it just leaves a lot to be desired. You're looking at guys like Treylon Burks, De'Ami Brown, Van Jefferson, Luke McCaffrey, and then recent third-round pick in this past year's draft, Antonio Williams out of Clemson. And none of those names stand out as a great second or maybe even third option behind Terry McLaurin. And of course, they did spend a high pick there on Antonio Williams, so we'll see what he can become. But without any proven success in the NFL, any proven production, I think it's tough to judge this receiver corps as anything other than very, very scarce out of Terry McLaurin for the positions that they want to run. Terry McLaurin is a fine receiver one, but the roles after that, like I said, I'm very hesitant about, at least in the receiver corps. And then you move on to the rest of the skill positions. You're talking about Chigakonkwo at the tight end position. I think he's a very serviceable NFL tight end, but he's a player that doesn't necessarily move the needle for me either way. Like I said, I think he's a very good tight end. If you had him as a backup, you would think that is a fantastic backup. He would be one of the better backup tight ends in the league. But as a starter for this Commanders offense, I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be a good player. And then at the running back spot, you're looking at a combination of Bill Krosky-Merritt and Rachaad White. I do like the pickup of Rachaad White. I think Bill Krosky-Merritt is a fine player, a good player. Same thing with Rachaad White and the things that they do. And I really do like Krosky-Merritt, but we'll see going into year 2. I mean, he was a 7th-round pick last year, so you kind of have to do it again a little bit to show me that you're going to be a very, very good player in this league. And overall, I am going to give this skill positions area a 4 out of 10 for Jayden Daniels as his surrounding pieces. And there's just a lot of unproven talent out of Terry McLaurin, and I think the talent is a little bit scarce in the receiver room with Burks, De'Ami Brown, Van Jefferson, Luke McCaffrey. None of those guys get me crazy excited to be your second or even third options. So we'll see. We're going to stick with a 4 out of 10 right now for these skill positions. Maybe McLaurin has a very good year. Bill Krosky-Merritt takes a huge step, and then we'll see. But 4 out of 10 for right now for these skill positions around Jayden Daniels. Now looking at this offensive line, I think this is a line that's going to go through some changes in the upcoming years, in my opinion. They do have a young piece in Josh Conerly Jr., who they did take in the first round of last year's draft, the 2025 draft, and I do believe he pairs well, especially contract-wise, with left tackle Laramie Tunsil, who is pretty much locked in as far as I can see by the contracts on Spot Track and over the cap. He is locked into his contract in Washington through 2027. So I really do like that tackle pairing. You have a young guy, you have a vet over there on the left side, and then you are going to have Sam Cosmi coming back off a concussion in 2025. That did limit him to 9 games. So I think that is going to help the middle of their offensive line. And Chris Paul is coming back as a projected starter this year. I think he started the last 14 or 15 games down the stretch for Washington last year. So he's coming back. And then they signed Nick Algretti at center. They brought in Matt Glubin in the 6th round to add some competition. But I do wish there was just a little bit more juice in this middle of the offensive line. I do really like their tackles, but the middle of the offensive line, we'll see what Sam Cosmi looks like coming back from that concussion. And then, of course, the same thing with Chris Paul. Last year was kind of his first year getting a lot of playing time, playing over double-digit games. I think in the rest of his seasons, he played 4, 5, 6 games, something like that. So he got to start a lot of games last season, and this is a season to go on ahead and do it again and prove you can be a legitimate starter in this league. So overall, I wish they would have done a little bit more with this offensive line, but I understand you did a ton on defense that we're going to get into a little bit later here with the next unit we're going to cover, and you can't fix it all in one offseason, but I do like this offensive line overall, and I think they can be an average unit, so I'm going to go with a 5 out of 10, with, of course, if that interior of the line can play really good and elevate their level of play, that number can jump, obviously, but we're going to stick with a 5 out of 10. I think Daniels is going to have a at least average offensive line in front of him in 2026. And I talked a little bit before about all the investments in the defense this offseason. I would say this is a defensive overhaul. They have a projected 6 possible new starters in 2026, and if you're doing the math at home, that's over half of the defensive starters that could be replaced from last season. And to be honest, I like a lot of what Washington did with all the pieces that they already had in place. The front of Daron Payne and Javon Kinlaw was already a pretty nice foundation, and then you add Tim Settle, you add Charles Omenihu, you add Owe and Chase on to rush off the edge. Linebackers Leo Chenal and Sonny Styles in the draft is going to be an extremely dynamic duo, and just that front 7 right there sounds really good. That mixture of guys, Tim Settle, Omenihu, Payne, Kinlaw, those rushers off the edge that they added. I think they could be a legit front 7 in the league this year. And of course, I do just want to shout out Sonny Styles. That guy's awesome. He's going to be an awesome NFL player. I can't believe he fell to Washington at 7. They kind of just fell in their lap. So congratulations, Washington. You got maybe the best player in the entire draft this year. And then you look at their secondary, they have great young pieces in Trey Amos, Mike Sanderstill, and they signed Nick Cross coming over from Indianapolis in free agency, who's still only 24 years old, so he's right on the same timeline as the rest of those guys. And I would really say the only thing missing from this defense is that elite pass rusher, that superstar pass rusher that can kind of close out games, close out drives, whatnot. But overall, I still think this defense is going to be awesome this year. I think they're going to be a really good unit, and this defensive overhaul was much needed. So we are going to go with a 7 out of 10. I think they're going to be a well above average defense. And if some of these guys can step in, Tim Settle, you talk about Leo Chenal, Styles, some of these new pieces, they can step in and elevate their play even higher with all the new pieces surrounding them, this number could go up and they could be a top 10 unit, top 5 unit type of outcome if all these guys hit their ceilings. But we'll stick with a 7 out of 10 right now in May for this Washington Commanders defense surrounding Jayden Daniels. Lastly, we do have to talk about coaching. Head coach Dan Quinn is going to his 3rd season with the team. And of course, over his run, he's had some success, and then last season kind of fell back down to earth, unfortunately. But both coordinators for this Commanders team are going to be first-year offensive and defensive coordinators in the NFL. Offensive coordinator David Blau, you might remember him, he did play quarterback in the NFL, has only been coaching since 2024. And defensive coordinator Durante Jones is also going into his 1st season. So there's a ton of newness with these coordinators in DC. And this is a very tough area to grade just because of that inexperience. I don't want to say experience is everything, because if you go somewhere and have a bad experience or bad experience from coaching under a bad coach, I don't think that's a good thing to have. So experience definitely isn't everything, but I do think a lack of experience. I think David Blau is like 30 years old, so very, very young coordinators. Dan Quinn, while he's kind of been there, done that, been to a Super Bowl in the NFL, he's still only going into his 3rd year in Washington. And I think all the newness can just leave me with a few questions, especially on the offensive side. How is Blau going to pair with Jayden Daniels? What is he going to let him do? How much is he going to let him run? What is the offense going to look like overall? So without proof of concept, it's really tough for me to give this coaching staff anything more than a 3 out of a 10. Of course, that number can go up, that number can go down, depending on what these first-year coordinators look like. What does that defense look like? And like we already talked about, what does Jayden Daniels look like pairing with David Blau? Is David Blau on that fast track to become one of these hot topic head coaching commodities in the offseason of 2027, 2028? Is he going to get one of these head coaching jobs? Or is he kind of fall flat on his face with Jayden Daniels and they keep falling back to earth, unfortunately? I don't necessarily want to predict either way. I have full faith in Jayden Daniels. I think he is a great quarterback, and I think he has a skill set to play in this league and be a very much a top-tier quarterback. But we are going to stick with a 3 out of 10 for this coaching staff. We'll let these young guys prove themselves, give us proof of concept before we go on ahead and crown them anything above average or a great coaching staff. We'll let them prove that to us on the field in 2026 this fall. My final grade for the situation surrounding Jayden Daniels in Washington this year is a 19 out of 40 possible points, or a 48%. This means, in my opinion, 48 of the stuff surrounding Jayden is positive for him, and otherwise, I think it's good. And the other 52% is a negative for his overall performance, or it's not going to help him, or it may hurt him. While this score isn't necessarily indicative of what I think the Commanders' season will look like, I do think it is a good overview as to what the quarterback actually has to work with. And I think it can put into perspective what our expectations for a player versus the reality of what the situation actually is. So that is what I think of what the Commanders did to surround their quarterback in 2026. Let me know if you agreed or disagreed, or what you thought I missed in the comment section below, and I hope to see you in the next one.